Back to My Garden, episode 37.
Welcome to Back to My Garden. Discover your passion for gardening. Here's Dave Ledoux.
This episode of Back to My Garden brought to you by Coffee Royalty. Can you really lose 5, 10, even 20 pounds or more just by switching your coffee or tea? Find out how to drink it for free at www.backtomygarden.com/coffee. Are you concerned about toxic chemicals, GMOs, and frankenfood? Don't panic. Grow organic. Discover my new resource for organic gardening. Go to www.backtomygarden.com/myorganic. Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world when you listen to this. I'm Dave Ledoux. Welcome to another edition of Back to My Garden. Going to have a fantastic guest for you today, folks. Diane Blazek from Illinois, just outside Chicago, is an insider's insider. She has a unique perspective behind the scenes in the world of bedding plants, annuals, and edibles. All America Selections and National Garden Bureau have direct connections to both flower and vegetable breeders and commercial growers. This is going to be fascinating stuff. Diane, welcome to the show.
Why, thank you, Dave. I'm really honored to be here.
I'm kind of scrambling as to where to start because there's so much to cover. I gave you a very small introduction. I want to get to hear your story, and our listeners want to get to know you, Diane. Take a minute or two and share with us a little bit about your background and how you got into gardening.
Oh, that's easy to do because I love to talk about it. And I think it goes way back to growing up on a farm. My dad was a farmer in north central Missouri. So living on a small farm back in the 60s, my parents always gardened. There were always flowers, and there was especially a vegetable garden. So some of my fondest memories are shelling peas and canning tomatoes and snapping the beans and doing everything like that. And then fast forward about 20 years later, I ended up in Chicago, and I was looking for a job, just wanting to make a little career switch. And I found a company that did publishing in horticulture. And I thought, horticulture, agriculture, pretty close. So I started working at Ball Publishing, and they have magazines that are geared to the commercial side of the horticulture industry, meaning one magazine for commercial growers, meaning bedding plant growers, and then another magazine for retailers. So I was there for 15 years, and that really was a great immersion in understanding what happens behind the scenes. You know, if you go to a garden center and you see a flat of petunias, what really goes into producing that flat of petunias?
Fantastic. Now, Diane, a lot of our listeners are either jogging or driving in their cars. A lot of them have their phones and smartphones hooked up. So if you're not in a safe location to take notes, I'll put all the links in the show notes. This will be at backtomygarden.com/37. Diane, let's make sure we mention all of the websites, shall we?
Sure. Thank you. First one is National Garden Bureau, and that website is ngb.org. Mm-hmm. And National Garden Bureau is a marketing organization for our members who are involved in horticulture. So companies like some of the plant breeders behind some of the famous varieties that you see, like Pan American Seed and Proven Winners and Cicada, those are members. So that's one organization. And another organization is All America Selections, and we are a plant trialing organization. And I like to define us that we're similar to like an underwriter's laboratory or Good Housekeeping in that we test products for the consumers and then give them a stamp of approval. That stamp of approval is the AAS Winner Award designation.
That's aaswinners.com?
Yes, correct.
And then I have notes here on a third one, which makes everyone smile. AmericanGardenAward.com. And this is where you vote for your favorite flower, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Consider it a beauty contest or something like American Idol. The main difference between American Garden Award and AAS Winners is that American Garden Award is voted on by the public. whereas the AAS winners are judged by professional horticulturists.
This is what I meant in the intro, that you're an insider's insider. A lot of these magazines I could never see if I went down to the store. It's not on the stands, right?
Correct. Yeah, they're considered a trade publication, so they're really meant for education purposes, business type articles, in-depth horticulture references, crop culture, pest and disease management, that type of thing. So yeah, the average gardener would probably have no interest whatsoever in these technical articles.
I have a interest though in this trialing or qualifying for the AAS winners. Can you talk a little bit about that process and what you've seen in the last year or two?
Oh yeah, it's very interesting. It's a blind trial where these breeders submit new, never before sold varieties into our trials. We trial them over one growing season, and they're always next to other varieties that are already on the market and that usually are, very good sellers, good performers. So we're testing these new varieties next to them, and only if they outperform are they designated as an AAS award winner. So that means that it's not just another variety, another Me Too that performs just as well as the other stuff on the market. It really has to do better according to our judging system. Then we go back to the breeder and say, congratulations, it performed really well. When would you like to introduce it? And we make announcements 3 times a year in July, November, and January. And that's when we announce some of the newest winners. And that's when they become available to the marketplace.
I would imagine that getting that award could make or break a small grower or a new breeder.
Yes, you're exactly right. It's really fun to tell the stories behind some of ours. One of my favorites, because it's more recent, is Cajun bell pepper. And this was a gentleman whose hobby was breeding peppers. He came up with something that he thought was going to be pretty cool because the taste was unique. It's, like these Cajun spices in a miniature red pepper. So he submitted it. It scored very well. He was ready to bring it to market. So he partnered with one of the larger breeding and production companies, and it's now a great seller. And it was just some guy who was pursuing his hobby in his backyard.
I just sat up straight in my chair, leaned into the microphone. I love peppers. So it's called a Cajun bell?
Cajun bell, yes.
Fun.
And it's a smaller pepper. That means that it can be grown in containers. So if we're touching on some of these things that are happening lately, I hesitate to call it a trend because I think it's just going to happen forever now. But more people growing vegetables on their patio, and Cajun bell is perfectly suited for that.
Oh, Diane, you just made a whole bunch of friends because a lot of our listeners are city dwellers with patio gardens, container gardens, and we're always looking for the next cool thing. I call it a cool thing because it's always fun sharing something that you grew yourself with your neighbor, and then the story comes out.
Exactly right. It's kind of like keeping up with the Joneses or having that next little bit of conversation starter, that you're serving something at your dinner party and somebody asks about it. And that's where you get to tell them the story is, oh, well, I heard about this and I grew it on my patio and look at how it's different from some of the other things. So, yeah, I agree with you. I think growing your own food is it's so rewarding.
I know you're very connected in the industry. I wanted to ask you about 2 things, kind of hot buttons. One is the weather and the drought in the Southwest, and the other is pollinators.
Yes, yeah, 2 very hot topics.
What's the conversation out there amongst, the breeders and growers?
Well, it's interesting that you bring that up. Every spring, I make a trip out to California. There's something called the California Spring Trials, and you stop at 25, 30 different greenhouses up and down the coast, and that's where the breeders are showcasing their new varieties for the upcoming season. And I would say definitely the last 2, if not longer, but this year and last year, what I really heard was, this is drought tolerant, this is heat tolerant, this will be more forgiving if you forget to water it. So the breeders are really staying up with some of the challenges that we're having in our country and, elsewhere also. But drought heat tolerant is something that they're breeding into some of the plants now.
Yeah, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to predict drought tolerant is going to be a buzzword for years to come.
Exactly.
Very good. And then in pollinators, is there a comeback yet? Is it still precarious? Is there a conversation around that?
Oh, there's definitely conversations around it, and I'm not enough of an expert to say whether or not there's a comeback. Just in my little spot of the world, I feel like I'm seeing a few more butterflies this year than in past years, but it's still precarious. We can never stop forgetting about our pollinator friends. We need them for our food. We need them for our future. We need them for our children. So I think you just have to be aware and stay up to date on what science is proving that is either helpful or not helpful. Seems like it changes almost every day. My main thing is, do what you can to attract pollinators. If that means you're going to be planting Nicotiana or Echinacea or natives, there's not a wrong thing to do. Just please plant something to attract pollinators, and that will help.
My wife is very strategic, very experienced, and right now she's got graph paper all over the dining room table, and she's drawing out next season's gardens. And
good for her.
She's putting flowers around the garden beds to attract more pollinators deeper into the gardens.
Great idea.
And,
yeah.
We're going to get the milkweed going here in a couple of weeks. We've had a strange summer. I think you're near Chicago. That polar vortex never seemed to go away this year.
It didn't. Yes, not yesterday, Tuesday, the high was like 65.
Lovely.
And it's August. I know. I love it. I can't complain. But I know that, some people are like, oh, well, these sun lovers, these heat tolerant plants are not doing as well when it only gets to be 65 in Chicago in the summer.
My tomatoes, all you see is brown sticks with a whole bunch of red in the garden.
Yes,
it's
the same here.
It's so cold at night now, and it's August, and I don't know. Do you put faith in the Farmer's Almanac?
I have not actually looked at one in years and years and years, but then I see somebody quote something from the Farmer's Almanac, and it is so dead on. So I think my theory or my conclusion there is I need to go buy a Farmer's Almanac.
I know. It's like, oh, they're reading tea leaves. That's, but
right.
They're saying September. Ooh, so we're planning for it.
Right.
We have to talk about the popularity contest. People love to know what's winning, and they love to know what's falling out of favor in their garden. Without getting too political or getting yourself in hot water, what's popular, what's trending, and what is definitely losing in popularity?
Well, I would say, okay, first, American Garden Award, it's just limited to about 4, 5, or 6 entries every year. And we put these entries online so that people can vote online. We also put them into public gardens. So each year we have about 30 to 35 public gardens that have our entries on display, and everybody gets to vote on them. And it is kind of interesting. We've tried to look and see what wins over the years. And it's always, for many years, it was like a big showy daisy-like flower. Well, then we had a begonia that won. So that one is a totally different thing, but it was really good in containers and kind of hung over the basket. That was called Santa Cruz Sunset. And now this year, I can't say that it's a winner because we still have voting going on until the end of September. But the one that's in first place is just like this whole new class of plant. It's a cross between a foxglove and a digitalis, so it's called DigiPlexus. And I think because it's new and different, the colors are great. So right now that's attracting a lot of attention. I was just at a convention and I was handing out postcards and asking people to vote. And it was kind of funny. The southern gardeners were like, oh, I love Kufia. Kufia does great in my southern garden. Da, da, da. They would always check off the Kufia. And then others would look at the celosia or the petunia. And so they weren't necessarily judging it on the specific varieties that were in the contest this year. They were just doing it on their past history. Oh, my mom loved it. My grandma loved it. I loved it. So there was a lot of emotion tied up into their voting.
There you go, folks. You heard it first. The DigiPlexus?
Yes, it's called DigiPlexus. The particular one that's in our contest is Illumination Flame. There are several colors out there, but it's very new to the market. Might be a little bit hard to find just because it is so new, but I think it's available mail order too. So DigiPlexus is a trademarked name, and that's the one to ask for if you're interested in something very new.
So for your career, you go around to these awesome conventions and just talk gardening all the time.
Yeah, it's a tough job.
Awesome. Now, will the DigiPlexus grow in Chicago?
Yes, it will. It's an annual. Yeah. So, it's
for temperature and stuff. I mean, my zone is Cleveland, Ohio, Detroit area. Mm-hmm. And I was curious because, these guys that are growing bananas and palm trees in their yards just can't relate.
Yeah. That's a whole topic in itself is people who are, pushing the boundaries of their zones. I mean, we know that climate change is going on, but I have found that the most passionate gardeners are the ones that do that. They try to grow tropicals and they try to overwinter them and bring them inside. And that's wonderful. I love that. But if I had advice for any kind of a newcomer, it's like, stick with your zone. Don't make it harder on yourself, even though, you may want to in future years as you learn what you're doing. But pay attention to those zones when you're buying perennials.
Without getting myself into trouble, my lovely wife bought a fig tree. And I'm sure there's a lot of sympathetic husbands. I'm going to have to lift this 50-pounder and bring it into the garage every winter. And I'm
yes, you are.
afraid it's going to it'll breed. There'll be 3 next season and then a whole forest of trees next year. And it's a slippery slope, isn't it?
It really is. I'm the same way. I'm planting perennials in containers now, and I just love the fact that I can bring them and store them in the garage over the winter. Of course, I have to give my husband credit that he lugs all these things in. But, it's fun, and it's a challenge, and it's so rewarding to see them come back in the spring, And so, yeah, sorry, I empathize with you, but I support your wife wholeheartedly, too.
Because you're what I would call an expert, you're in the industry, and you're busy, you're traveling for work. What is your garden like personally this season? What's working for you and what's frustrating you?
That's a good point because, summer is my busiest travel time, and I need a professional waterer. That's always what I say happens when I'm gone. Of course, I have my husband and my daughter are home to kind of water, but there's just, it's a challenge as far as keeping up your garden when you're doing a lot of traveling. Some of the stuff that is doing the best for me this year, I love planting herbs. So my basil is going crazy this year. I've got sage, getting quite a few tomatoes. We were talking about pollinators earlier. I had a hummingbird butterfly garden, and sometimes I get free samples. So I had gotten some roses to put in there. And I realized that in that garden, that's one of the few sunny spots I have. So I plopped some tomatoes in where the roses used to be because they didn't make it this year. And I think my hummingbird butterfly garden with those tomatoes in there is probably the best thing in my garden this year because I'm getting a ton of tomatoes off of them, and all the bees and hummingbirds are happy.
Nice. You had a bad winter, though, didn't you, last year? A killing winter?
We really did. And other than those roses, I don't think I lost much. A lot of people are talking about the hydrangeas, and I had just planted some new ones last year, and they survived beautifully. So I'm trying to think if I don't think I lost a single thing last year. But luckily, most of my garden is right next to the house, which kept it a little bit more temperate than, if it had been 50 yards away from the house on the north side or something like that.
Congrats on your basil. We've had so much rain in our area. People are getting like a rusty spot on their basil.
Well, yeah, I had to harvest mine before I got that. So that's one of the keys. Keep an eye on it. If you happen to travel and come back from a trip and it has it, like I happened to on part of it, yeah, then it's not the good news.
Let's take a minute to thank our sponsors and then come back and play 5 quick questions. What's the hottest trend in gardening? I think the hottest trend is aquaponics. Can you really grow a massive garden powered by fish? Find out more and discover the secrets to building fish-powered gardens at www.backtomygarden.com/fish. Tomatoes. Do you love homegrown tomatoes? Free report reveals the 5 dirt cheap tools I use to grow 22 types of heirloom tomatoes, including my secret soil booster. Download your copy for free today at www.backtomygarden.com/free report. Fantastic. Well, I've been looking at the clock. It's time in the show to play everybody's favorite game called 5 Quick Questions. This is where you get to share your wisdom and resources with beginning gardeners. Are you ready to play?
Oh, certainly.
Fun. Okay, Diane, question number 1. In your opinion, what do you think stops most people from trying gardening?
A fear of failure or a lack of information, which is kind of surprising, as much information that's out there. I still think that they're just not sure where to start.
Excellent. Number 2. You've come in contact with some incredible gardeners over the years. What is the single best piece of gardening advice that you've ever received?
It starts with the soil.
Ooh. Can you say more on that?
That's the basis of everything. If you plant this beautiful plant in concrete or clay or sand, it's not going to do well. So take care of your soil, add compost. If you have a good base, then your vegetables and your flowers are going to do great.
Good advice. The internet's a big place, and it's great for gardeners because there's so many resources. Can you recommend 2 websites for the novice gardener that you find very useful?
Oh, that's hard, but it's easy. Well, tough question, because I'm going to say All America Selections, which is aaswinners.com. And the reason I'll say that is because, like I had talked about earlier, our varieties have been tested all over the U.S., 40, 45 different trial sites. So when you pick something on there, you know that it's been tested. And if it fails, it's probably the weather. It's not you. It's not the genetics. Something happened with weather or bugs. And then, of course, the other one is National Garden Bureau, because we have so much information on there. We do new varieties. We have fact sheets on different year of crops, and we have a whole slew of articles. We have links to some of the best blogs and garden magazines that are online. So there's a wealth of information on ngb.org also.
Good. On AAS Winners, are you ever surprised that a grower will do well or fail? Are you ever shocked by the outcomes?
Yes, sometimes, and sometimes we get an entry that you're thinking, well, how could that possibly win? What's going to be so much better about it? And it comes through. Or there's something that you think is such a niche item or historically hasn't grown well, throughout North America, and all of a sudden it's doing fantastic. So yeah, there's some interesting surprises every once in a while. And I think I mentioned that these are anonymous. They're blind trials, so nobody ever knows the breeder that's behind them. So it's so fun when our judges are like, well, I'm pretty sure that's from so-and-so. And it really surprises me that they're breeding this. And in my mind, I'm thinking, oh, you're going to be surprised. You don't know who that breeder is.
Do I have access to that? Like I can order it from the general public, or do I have to track it down?
On our website, aaswinners.com, there is a seed source list. So you have to go to the AS Winners portion, and then there's an Excel file. So on there, we try to keep track. You know, this is really hard. You never know when somebody's going to sell out or something. But we ask for mail order sources for seed. And so that's the best way to find the AAS winners. If you start from young plants or bedding plants, then the best thing to do is just ask at your local garden retailer.
I've developed this slightly concerning interest in hot peppers. And I have a Naga Viper that's nearly ready. It's 1.3 million Scovilles.
Woo.
And these guys don't fool around. These things are borderline dangerous to eat.
Well, that's what I was just thinking. We were having a conversation not too long about that. It's like, well, why do you grow them? Is it like we were talking about earlier? Is it kind of like bragging rights to have something? Because that gets pretty dangerous to eat something that hot. Yeah,
it's like fastest car, or, you know, I think it's probably a male-dominated branch of gardening.
Yes, I think so.
Yeah, you don't see, women have too much sense to eat 1 million Scovilles.
Yeah.
Sorry, all the ladies out there that like peppers, but you know what I'm saying. Yeah.
Right.
Good. Oh, I got off topic here. Number 4. Oh, books. I still love to read gardening books. A lot of the listeners love traditional gardening books. Can you recommend a favorite or something that's caught your interest?
Oh, my goodness. That's really hard because I'm like you. I love books. At home, I have walls filled. At my office, there's walls filled. And, you know, I honestly don't think I can say that I have a favorite. And it would be hard to recommend one because it depends, number one, on regionality, you know, where somebody lives, because my garden is going to be totally different from somebody in Ontario and somebody in Florida. So I think my advice is understand where you're gardening, what your garden conditions are for climate and soil and everything. And also, how do you want to garden? Do you want an organic garden? Do you want a native garden? Do you want an edible garden? Do you want a lot of trees and shrubs? Or do you have all sun? Do you want prairie? So, you know, if you're a new gardener, you have to understand what you want before you can decide what your resources are going to be.
Very good. Number 5 is a bit of a fun one, Diane. What's the number one thing that you want to suggest that gardeners try to grow next season?
Wow, that is tough.
You can hedge a little bit if you want.
And I was going to say, how specific? And is this an experienced gardener or a new gardener? I'll answer both ways. For a new gardener, for somebody just wanting to get started, I would recommend starting with herbs. I call herbs the gateway garden.
Hang on,
they're easy.
I'm writing that down.
They're easy to grow. And for people who like to cook or who are a foodie or who love Food Network or the cooking channel, to me, herbs are a way to really get hooked. Once you put a fresh herb into a dish, you'll never go back to dried. So that's what I would suggest. And as far as the other thing every gardener should grow, whatever their favorite is, you know, a garden is supposed to be rewarding. So if it's roses you like, then you got to plant roses. If you like eating fresh tomatoes off the vine, then make sure you grow tomatoes. So I'm not going to name anything specific other than the fact that grow your favorite, whatever gives you joy.
I wrote down 3 that you mentioned on the show. You mentioned the Cajun bell pepper, the Santa Cruz Sunset, and the DigiPlexus.
Mm-hmm.
All excellent starting points for... It's like looking at the Christmas catalog, some of these seed company websites. Like you don't know how to pick.
Yeah, it's really hard. It really is, yeah.
Fantastic. All of Diane's links, websites will be up on the blog at backtomygarden.com/37. Diane, the time has flown by. You're an amazing guest. I get the sense you and I could probably talk for 2 or 3 hours about this stuff.
We probably could.
I want to give you the last word to the listeners. Do you have a pearl of wisdom or a note of encouragement for our listeners on their gardening adventures?
Yes, don't be afraid of failure. Gardening is just a whole process of experimentation and successes. So, not really to paraphrase Nike, but just do it. Just try gardening. And like I said, if something fails or isn't quite what you thought, just move it, try it in a different spot, try it again next year. That's the main thing that I want to say about gardening is it's very rewarding, and don't be intimidated by it.
Diane, thank you so much for being on the show.
Well, thank you very much, and I hope you have wonderful gardening weather over the next couple of weeks.